Hello, I'm back. Hopefully with better video and audio quality this time, and I have a Charmera. Let's see if I can get to focus on it. Nice. This thing's a tiny little retro-inspired keychain camera, and it seems to be all the rage these days. It's supposed to, and to be fair, does evoke the old candy bar shaped 110 cameras from the 80s. The Charmer comes in a blind box, meaning you don't know which color you're going to get until you open the box. I ended up with the blue one, obviously, which looks pretty rad in my opinion. You also get a little keychain to put the camera on and a USB-C cable for charging and for image transfer, but you do not get a micro SD card, which is required. Given the specs of this camera, though, pretty much any micro SD card will work fine. I picked up a 2-pack of Amazon Basic 64 gigabyte cards on Amazon for about 15 bucks. The Charmer shoots 1.6 megapixel photos through a quarter-inch CMOS sensor and a 35 millimeter equivalent f2.4 lens. So this is the point right here in the intro where I'm going to tell you that this little camera does not take very good photos. I mean, given the price and the specs and the fact that it's mainly just for fun, and no reasonable person would expect this little camera to be cranking out photos that compete with really any real camera, that shouldn't be too terribly surprising. I just want to be super clear right up front that this camera doesn't take very good photos. In fact, I would say it takes pretty bad photos. If you're young, you might not even remember a time when 1.6 megapixel photos were a thing. And if, like me, you're old and do remember 1.6 megapixel photos, things have changed. See, I absolutely remember a time when phone cameras had just come out and one or two megapixel had 1 or 2 megapixel sensors, and actually even before then using stuff like the Sony Mavica cameras that took 1.3 megapixel images and wrote them directly to a 3.5-inch floppy disk. And in my memory, sure, they didn't look like DSLR images, but they weren't that bad. The thing is, though, we were looking at those low resolution images on a low resolution display. No one had a 4K 27-inch monitor like I use today. We were either viewing them on a 320 by 240 phone screen, or maybe the big baller 1024 by 768 17-inch CRT monitor. These low resolution photos really do not hold up in 2026 with modern screens. It might sound like I'm just trashing this camera, but I'm not really, solely because I wouldn't expect anyone to think this little thing is going to take good photos. I'm just trying to set expectations properly so that you understand exactly how bad these photos are. Also worth mentioning, if you look at the Amazon listing, it says it's for beginners. And if this was my first exposure to photography, I would probably never take another photo again. This is absolutely not a camera for beginners. Basically, this is a camera that takes pictures that look borderline passable on Instagram if you understand the camera's limitations. But if you look at these photos on your desktop, you're like, ugh. The controls are, as you would expect, very basic. Up top, there's a power button and a shutter button. On the back, you have up and down arrows that cycle through the picture profiles and effects, something I'll cover in a minute, and a playback button that serves as an OK button to confirm settings. The bottom of the camera has a USB-C port and a micro SD card slot. Powering the camera on requires a long press of the power button, which probably makes sense for a camera that's going to be on your keychain, but this does make quickly capturing photos pretty hard to do. I think it's probably best to just power it on and leave it on while you're trying to snap some pictures, as opposed to turning it off between shots. Battery life seems fine. I haven't run the battery down yet, but to be totally fair, this isn't a camera that lends itself to like extended photo sessions. Basically, you'll give out before the battery does. The Charmera has a viewfinder, which I can't see a damn thing through. If you're younger and or have better eyesight, you might have more luck than me. I find using the back screen to compose works a lot better. The screen is small, but it's good enough to line up your shot. The Charmera has a bunch of different filters you can apply to the pictures it takes. These fall into two different categories: picture profiles and effects. For the picture profiles, you get standard, warm, cool, and black and white. These are all pretty much self-explanatory. The warm setting gives you warmer tones, the cool setting gives you cooler tones, and the black and white setting gives you a black and white picture. If you keep scrolling from there, you get into the photo effects. You have a film strip look, which looks like when you scan the whole negative from a film camera and you can see the sprocket holes on the edge of the film. You have one that looks like an old 90s image editor. You have one that adds a bunch of random Kodak emojis and looks pretty thoroughly unhinged. And you have one that adds the camera itself around your picture, like those apps that will let you add your phone around your screenshot. Then you get red, blue, yellow, and black and white modes that kind of look like pixel art, like an old video game or something. All the ones that add a frame of any kind do crop into your picture, effectively changing the field of view of the lens. So that's something to keep in mind. So for the sample gallery here, I'm going to do something a little bit different. And I'm going to show the pictures in a small size, like you would experience them on Instagram or something, and then show you the full size image so you can get a better idea of how the pictures will look in different scenarios. Because for this camera, that's going to make a huge difference. Anyway, check out some sample photos, and then I'll be back to talk some more. Oh, it also records video. It records video in the same way that like a lifted Jeep Wrangler will go around a road course. It doesn't look very pretty and it's not very enjoyable for anyone involved, but it will technically do it. Okay, so as you notice, there's a big difference in perceived quality based on how large you're viewing the images from this camera. If you look at them in full size on a computer screen, they look like, to use a technical photography term, total ass. But honestly, that's fine. If you buy this camera because you want to take photos to print as posters, you're just doing it wrong. If you know a little bit about photography, you can get some pictures out of it that'll look cool on a phone screen. To that end, I have a few tips that might be helpful. First off, the dynamic range on this camera seems to be no. You're going to want to look for very even lighting. Also, this is a very simple camera with no way to change the metering. It's not like you can switch to spot metering or highlight weighted. You just get whatever it gives you. This means you're definitely going to want to avoid having any bright light source in the photo. It'll just blow everything out. Also, it seems to take a second for the metering to change when you go from a bright scene to a dark scene or vice versa. If you change from a dark area to a bright area and immediately press the shutter button, it'll be totally blown out. If you wait a few seconds for the camera to catch up and like change the exposure, it'll only be mostly blown out. Also, it has a flash in that it has a tiny little LED on it, but it's not doing much. I mean, if you're in absolute total darkness, the flash might allow you to capture a terrible photo as opposed to no photo, but that's about all you're going to get out of it. Also, given the small sensor and reasonably slow lens, once you're in anything other than full outdoor lighting, things fall apart very fast. The only options the camera has to give you a half-ass passable exposure in low light is to really crank the ISO and pull down the shutter speed. With no stabilization of any kind and a camera that weighs like 30 grams, slow shutter speeds result in very blurry images. I would primarily use this for outdoor photos if you want them to be passable. This is such a hard camera to really review because it is charming and fun and cute, and it's cheap enough to be a novelty, and no one really expects a lot from it. But the photos are honestly really, really bad. Like, the quality is too low to really do anything with. The pictures look like they're from a webcam from 2005. It's just straight trash. I honestly feel like this would be a much better experience if the camera was just a little bit better. A couple more megapixels of resolution and a stop or two of dynamic range would go like such a long way. Just as a point of reference, these pictures were shot with a Google Nexus 1 in April of 2010. It's been a long time since even cell phones took pictures as bad as the Charmera. Also, one of the bigger misses for me is the lack of an app. I'm usually all about just transferring to a computer like via a cable, but for this camera, it doesn't really make sense to not have an app to quick share to social media, aka the only place these pictures look passable. So you're supposed to keep this camera on your keychain just as a little novelty thing, but when you take pictures with it, you go to your desktop, plug it in with a cable, transfer the photos, send those to your phone, and then post it online. It's just not a great workflow for like quick shareable snapshots. That said, it is a fun little camera to play with, but I think the marketing material is just straightforwardly incorrect. This is not a camera for kids or beginners. The person who would actually like this camera is someone who is already a photography nerd and would get at least $30 worth of enjoyment in working around the camera's obvious shortcomings. Obviously, the nostalgia and tiny form factor and low price also add to its appeal. If there's a photographer in your life that fits that description, or if you fit that description, it might be a fun purchase, but this is not a gateway drug to photography. I think that about wraps it up for the Charmera. If you enjoyed this video, throw me a like or subscribe, and I'll keep making videos about dumb cameras. See you next week.